How one family's manipulation almost destroyed Clara. Family conflict story. In today's family conflict story, we dive into a powerful narrative of family dynamics, pressure, and personal boundaries. Clara's life is turned upside down when her family begins demanding she use her inheritance to support their needs. How far will they push her, and how will she respond? Watch the full video to find out. And if you enjoy stories like this, don't forget to like and subscribe to Silent Wars for more thought-provoking content. I'm Clara, a 27-year-old woman from a small, close-knit family in a quiet suburban neighborhood. My parents, Linda and George, have spent the last 20 years running a bakery that has become a staple in our community. It's the kind of place you would walk into on a chilly Sunday morning, greeted by the welcoming scent of fresh bread. The warm, inviting atmosphere was a reflection of the way our family operated on the surface. Everything seemed perfect. We weren't rich by any means, but we had just enough. Our life wasn't about grand luxuries, but it was built on hard work and dedication. My parents worked tirelessly, and from a young age they instilled in me and my younger brother Max the importance of earning what we had and being grateful for it. Growing up, Max was always the center of attention in our household. He was my parents' golden boy, the one who could do no wrong. If he slipped up, it was easily brushed off. If he achieved something, it was a moment of pride, celebrated with enthusiasm. Whether it was his latest sports victory or his high grades at school, Max was the one who basked in the spotlight. On the other hand, I was the quiet one, the one who preferred staying out of the limelight. While Max's every move was greeted with cheers, I didn't mind being in the background. I had my own passions, my own goals, and I didn't need constant validation to feel fulfilled. I focused on the things that mattered to me, whether it was drawing in my sketchbook or daydreaming about starting my own business one day. At first, I didn't mind the disparity between how my parents treated Max and me. He was younger, and I assumed that was why he was so doted on. But over time, the weight of it started to feel heavy. I began to notice the subtle ways in which my achievements were downplayed, or worse, ignored. When I did something good, like earning a scholarship to a prestigious university, the praise was always more muted. It was never enough to compare to the praise Max received for something as simple as getting a decent grade on a test. As I grew older, I learned to accept that this was just how things were. Max would always be the golden boy, and I would always be the quiet, hard-working older sister, content with staying out of the drama. However, things began to shift when Max and I both got older. The dynamic that had existed for so many years, with Max being the apple of my parents' eyes, began to show its cracks. I realized that I was now the one who had to hold my ground, to assert myself in a family where attention was usually given to one person, the golden child. And while I had learned to live with it, it was becoming harder to ignore. The feeling of being unseen and unheard was becoming more and more suffocating, especially as I moved into adulthood. This family dynamic that seemed so perfect on the outside was starting to show its true colors. It was when Max got engaged to his girlfriend Lily that things took a darker turn. Suddenly, my role in the family seemed to be defined by the money I could provide, the inheritance that I'd never even planned to touch. Lily, with her polished charm and social grace, started making comments that hinted at something much deeper, a feeling that I had more to give than just my presence. And that's when I realized that the family I had once adored and felt part of was changing, shifting into something that no longer felt like home. It was no longer about love, it was about control, manipulation, and what could be extracted from me. And this time, I wasn't willing to be the one who quietly stood by. The perfect family facade was crumbling, and I was finally forced to confront the toxic undercurrents I had avoided for so long. 5 years ago, my grandfather, the man who had always been there for me, passed away. I remember the day the will was read as though it were yesterday. It felt like a surreal moment, one I wasn't fully prepared for. My grandfather had been the steady force in our family, the patriarch who always made sure we knew the importance of family and tradition. He had worked hard all his life to provide for us, and when he passed, he left behind a legacy that, while not enormous, was significant enough to make a difference in my life. When I heard that he had left me a trust fund, my heart swelled with mixed emotions. It wasn't a fortune, but it was substantial enough that, if used wisely, it could change my life. It wasn't the kind of windfall that would allow me to retire on a beach somewhere, but it was enough to help me start fresh, pursue my dreams, and secure my future. However, there was a catch. I couldn't access the funds until I turned 30. And even then, the money could only be used for specific purposes, like buying a house or furthering my education. This stipulation seemed fair to me. After all, it was my grandfather's way of ensuring I made responsible choices. At first, I didn't think much about the money. It wasn't something I could use right away, so I tucked it away in my mind as something to consider when I got closer to 30. What I didn't anticipate was that this trust fund, which I had always seen as a blessing, would eventually become the center of a battle within my family. The trust fund was a quiet promise of security, something that could allow me to achieve my goals and live independently without the heavy burden of debt. I had always prided myself on being self-sufficient, never relying on others, but the trust fund felt like a safety net for my future. Little did I know that my family, especially Max and his fiancée Lily, would begin to view it as something they were entitled to. It started off subtly, with little comments here and there at family gatherings. Emma, Max's fiancée, began to drop hints, talking about how wonderful it would be if I could help with their wedding, or even use the money for a down payment on a house. I laughed it off at first, assuming it was a joke, but as time went on, it became clear that Emma wasn't joking. I found myself caught in a whirlwind of emotions as Max, my parents, and even Lily started pressuring me to help with their financial situation. They seemed to think that because the money was available to me, it should be used to help them. The more they asked, the more I felt suffocated. What was once a gift from my grandfather, something that felt like a personal and sacred bond, was now being turned into an expectation. It became painfully clear that the trust fund wasn't just about securing my future anymore, it was about what others believed they could extract from me. The battle for this inheritance began to grow, and I soon realized that my family's vision of helping had little to do with genuine support and everything to do with control and entitlement. What was meant to be a personal gift had turned into something bitter. It was a reminder that no matter how much we give, some people will always feel they have the right to take more. In the end, I learned that while the inheritance could be a blessing, it had also opened my eyes to the deeper, darker issues of entitlement and manipulation within my family. Something that was meant to empower me now felt like an obligation, and I had to make difficult decisions about my boundaries and how far I was willing to go to preserve my own peace of mind. Fast forward to this year, when my younger brother Max got engaged to Lily, his fiancée. On the surface, everything seemed to fall into place perfectly. Lily came from a wealthy family, and from the outside, they appeared to be the perfect couple, young, ambitious, and already planning their future together. At first, I genuinely liked her. She was charming, outgoing, and always had a way of making people feel at ease. I thought she was the kind of person who could bring balance to Max's life, which sometimes felt like it revolved around the whims of our parents. But as the months went on, things started to feel off. I couldn't quite put my finger on it at first, but I began noticing small things, how she always seemed to need the spotlight, or how every conversation somehow circled back to their wedding plans, with little regard for anyone else's thoughts or feelings. Then came that family dinner, the one that would change everything. It was an ordinary evening, or so I thought. The table was filled with the usual chatter. Max and Lily were discussing their wedding plans, and everyone else was talking about the latest happenings in our lives. I was just listening and eating when, out of nowhere, Lily casually asked me what I planned to do with my inheritance when I could finally access it. At first, I thought she was joking, making light of the situation, but as I looked at her, I realized she was entirely serious. She leaned in a little closer, almost like she was about to tell me a secret. "You know, Max and I could really use some help with the wedding," she said, almost like an afterthought. "Or maybe even a down payment on a house. That would make a huge difference for us." My heart sank, and I couldn't believe what I was hearing. The audacity of the request stunned me. It was as if she had no hesitation whatsoever in assuming that my inheritance was something up for grabs, a resource to be used for their benefit. I tried to laugh it off, not knowing how to respond to such an unexpected and uncomfortable comment. At first, I figured maybe she didn't fully understand how personal the money was to me, but the more I thought about it, the more I realized that it wasn't about misunderstanding, it was about entitlement. She was clearly assuming that because I had access to this money in the future, it was only natural that I would share it. My mind raced as I tried to digest what had just happened. I had been planning for years to use the trust fund for something that would help me build my own future, whether it was purchasing a home or starting my own business. The idea that someone would think I could or should give it away so casually made me feel sick. The fact that Max didn't intervene or express any discomfort with the request only made things worse. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that I was being dragged into something that wasn't just about helping out family, it was about manipulation. I wasn't just being asked to share something I had worked hard for. I was being expected to prioritize their needs and desires over my own future. My brother and his fiance's lack of understanding, or perhaps their deliberate disregard for my plans, left me questioning everything. Was this truly what family was about? Were they only interested in me as a means to get what they wanted? At first, I brushed it off, thinking maybe it was just a one-time slip-up, a casual comment made without much thought. After all, Lily and Max had been excited about their engagement and wedding plans, and I figured that they were just overwhelmed with the logistics and the financial burden that often comes with it. But as time went on, it became clear that this wasn't a one-time thing. The pressure kept building. At every family gathering, Lily would casually drop subtle hints about my trust fund. It started with comments that seemed innocent enough, but the more she said them, the more I felt like she was testing the waters. "It's amazing that you have that kind of opportunity, Clara," she would say with a big smile. "You're in such a good position to help your family. Not everyone gets a trust fund like that." On the surface, it seemed like a simple acknowledgement of my situation, but something about her tone made me uneasy. It was like she was trying to plant a seed, to make me feel like my trust fund wasn't just a financial asset for me, it was a resource for the whole family. The worst part was that Max, who had never shown any real interest in my finances before, started chiming in too. He'd add little comments here and there, almost like he was trying to make it sound reasonable. "You're not using the money right now, Clara," he'd say, almost nonchalantly. "Why not help us out? It could really make a difference for us with the wedding, or even a down payment on a house." His words were softer than Lily's, but they hit me just as hard. I couldn't understand how he, of all people, would expect me to hand over my inheritance for something as personal as their wedding or their future home. It wasn't just them. My parents, who I thought would back me up, didn't step in when they could clearly see the situation getting uncomfortable. Instead of shutting it down or even acknowledging that Lily and Max were crossing a line, they brushed it off as no big deal. "They just want to feel supported," my mom would say with a nonchalant shrug. It's not that big of a deal, Clara. Just think about it. My dad would agree, adding, family helps each other out when they're in need. Maybe this is just their way of asking for support. Every time they said that, it felt like a gut punch. It was as if they didn't see how wrong it was for Lily and Max to treat my inheritance like their personal piggy bank. The pressure didn't just stop at family dinners or gatherings. It began to seep into every conversation, every phone call, and even casual meetups. I couldn't escape it. It was like they were all waiting for me to cave in, for me to give in to their requests, and make them think that their needs were more important than my own. I had worked hard to get where I was, and this money wasn't something I could just hand over because they felt entitled to it. I started to feel cornered. It wasn't just about money anymore. It was about my values, my independence, and my sense of self. Every time I tried to explain my position, how I wasn't going to give away my trust fund, how it wasn't available yet, how I had my own plans for it, they would counter it with, "You're in a good position, Clara. Why not help us?" It felt like my boundaries were being systematically eroded, and I couldn't help but wonder, how far would they push me before I finally said no? It was after yet another family dinner when I reached my breaking point. The night had been full of forced smiles, awkward conversations, and the usual fake warmth that seemed to swirl around my family gatherings lately. But this time, it was different. I should have known something was off when Lily, who usually kept her distance after making those subtle comments, suddenly cornered me. This wasn't a casual remark, or another roundabout question about my trust fund. No, this time she was coming at me full force. "Clara," she started, her voice unusually calm, but with a hint of something sharp beneath it. "I really think you should reconsider what you're doing with that money. Helping Max and me out would show that you truly care about the family." The words hit me like a slap in the face. I stood there, stunned, unable to believe what I was hearing. The nerve of it. She was accusing me of being selfish for wanting to keep what was mine, for not giving in to their persistent demands. I was so taken aback that for a moment I couldn't even respond. But then the words came rushing out. I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm, and said, "Lily, the money isn't accessible yet, and even if it were, I have my own plans for it. It's not about being selfish. I've worked hard for this, and I need to think about my future too." But she didn't back down. She stared at me with that smug, knowing smile that seemed to say she was already victorious in her mind. "You don't need the money right now," she snapped, her tone growing more impatient. "You're being selfish, Clara. You can help us. Why not? It's a small amount, and it could make such a big difference for us. You're overthinking this." I couldn't believe it. The audacity to call me selfish to my face, as if I was the one who had been taking advantage of the situation all along. I had always been there for my family in the ways that mattered. I helped when they needed support, whether it was emotionally or in small practical ways. But now I was being told I was selfish because I wasn't willing to hand over money I wasn't even able to access yet. It was infuriating. I tried to explain again, trying to keep my voice steady. "This money is not mine to give away yet. It's not even available for use until I'm 30. And when it is, it's for specific purposes like buying a home or furthering my education. You don't understand how hard I've worked to build my future, and I'm not going to risk that for something that's not even mine to give." But Lily wasn't listening. Her face twisted with frustration, and she shot back. "This could really help Max and me. You're in a good position, Clara, but you're too selfish to see that." It was like she was deliberately twisting the situation, turning my careful planning and responsibility into something negative. I could feel my anger rising, but I kept it in check. The silence between us hung heavy, and I couldn't believe how manipulative she was being. How far was she willing to go to get what she wanted? At that moment, I realized how deep the problem ran. This wasn't just about money, it was about control. It was about trying to make me feel guilty for having the ability to make decisions for my own future. And for the first time, I truly saw how entitled Lily had become and how my family had allowed her to behave this way. I walked away from the conversation feeling defeated, but more determined than ever to stand my ground. The pressure was immense, but I wasn't going to let them dictate how I handled my life and my inheritance. I could feel the weight of the situation growing heavier, but I knew one thing for sure: I wasn't backing down. Not this time. The situation spiraled out of control faster than I could have imagined. At first, Max had seemed indifferent, not really taking a stance on the whole inheritance issue. But then, as time went on, he started taking Lily's side more and more. It was subtle at first, just a comment here and there like, "It wouldn't hurt to think about it." But it was clear he was testing how far he could push me. His tone wasn't demanding, but it carried a weight that made my stomach churn. I couldn't believe my own brother was getting caught up in this manipulation. I always thought Max would be the one to stand by me when things got tough, but now it seemed like he was too caught up in his fiancée's influence. He was no longer the person I could count on. It hurt more than I expected. I had always been the responsible one, the one who made sure everything was in order. And now, here I was, facing this betrayal from the people who were supposed to be my support system. When I finally brought it up to my parents, I was hoping for some relief, some assurance that they understood my side. I expected them to back me up, to remind me that my trust fund was mine and mine alone, that I wasn't selfish for wanting to keep it. But instead, their reaction was completely unexpected. My mom, who had always been my biggest supporter, said, "You know, Lily just wants to be part of the family. She doesn't mean to push." The words hit me like a ton of bricks. I stood there, stunned, unable to comprehend what I was hearing. My mom, the one person who always had my back, was now defending Lily? She was excusing Lily's manipulative behavior as if it were nothing more than a harmless desire to fit in. I couldn't believe it. I tried to explain that it wasn't just about Lily trying to be part of the family. It was about her trying to take control of something that wasn't hers. I felt like I was losing the fight before it even began. My dad, who had always been level-headed, didn't say much at first, but when he did speak, it was more of the same. He agreed with Mom, adding that Lily's intentions weren't bad. "She's just trying to make things easier for everyone," he said. That was the turning point. My parents, the ones who had always stood by me through thick and thin, were now siding with Lily. I could feel my world crashing down around me. It wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about how my family had failed to recognize the manipulation happening right in front of them. How had they been so blind? I felt betrayed. The trust I had in my family was shattered, and I didn't know how to fix it. Every word out of their mouths seemed to reinforce the idea that I was in the wrong for standing my ground, that my priorities were misplaced. The pain of their dismissal stung more than I was ready to admit. And now, I was left alone to deal with the fallout of a family that no longer felt like home. This wasn't just about money, it was about respect, boundaries, and being seen for who I truly was. It was about realizing that sometimes the people you love can let you down in the most unexpected ways. And that realization, painful as it was, would change everything. A few weeks after the tension had simmered down, my parents invited me over for what they called a family meeting. At first, I thought it was just an opportunity to talk things through, to finally set the record straight and maybe regain some sense of normalcy. But as soon as I walked into the living room, I was blindsided. There, sitting on the couch with a calm but smug demeanor, were Max and Lily. They were ready for the talk. My heart sank. I had no idea what they had planned, but I had a feeling I wasn't going to like it. My parents, who had always been the ones I could count on for support, were now part of this orchestrated intervention. They started off with their usual soft, manipulative tone. My mom, the one who always had my back, opened with, "Clara, we just want to keep the peace. Let's find a compromise." I could see it in Max's eyes. He and Lily were already in sync. They were sitting there, arms crossed, looking smug as if they had already won. They knew exactly what was coming, and I couldn't help but feel like I was walking into a trap. My parents were no longer on my side. They were trying to mediate, trying to make it seem like all I needed to do was give a little, and everything would be fine again. Then, my mom spoke again. Her words were like a knife to the chest. "Maybe you could help them out. Just a little." The request was the same as it had always been: money. The very thing I had been adamantly refusing to give. The very thing they had been pushing me for, time and time again. I had heard it enough. It was the final straw. I stood there feeling a mix of disbelief and anger boiling inside me. I had done everything to stay calm and collected, but this was too much. I took a deep breath, and with as much composure as I could muster, I refused. "No," I said firmly. "I'm not giving them anything. Not now. Not ever." The room fell silent. My parents' faces, once warm and supportive, now looked confused and disappointed. But I wasn't backing down. This wasn't about the money anymore. It was about principle. It was about standing my ground when it felt like everyone else was trying to push me into a corner. Max and Lily exchanged a quick glance, and I could see Lily's lips press into a thin line, frustration evident on her face. But I didn't care. I had spent years trying to please them, trying to meet their expectations, and it had always been at the expense of my own happiness and well-being. This time, I wasn't going to fold. I wasn't going to let them manipulate me into making a choice that wasn't right for me. My parents were still sitting there, silent, as though they were waiting for me to change my mind. But I remained firm. The tension in the room was palpable. They weren't used to me standing up for myself. They were used to me being the quiet one, the one who always went along with what they wanted. But not this time. After what felt like an eternity, Max spoke, his voice soft, but filled with disappointment. "You're being unreasonable, Clara," he said, his words cutting deeper than I expected. This could really help us. But I didn't let his words sway me. "No, Max," I replied. "What's unreasonable is asking me for something that isn't mine to give." With that, I stood up, my heart pounding in my chest. "I'm done with this conversation," I said, and without another word, I walked out of the house. As I closed the door behind me, I felt a strange mix of relief and sadness. I knew I had made the right choice, but it hurt to see how far my family had fallen. They were no longer the people I could turn to for support. They had become people who only cared about what I could give them. This was it, the final straw. There was no going back now. After that painful family meeting, I couldn't shake the overwhelming feeling that something had gone terribly wrong. What I initially thought was a simple family disagreement had spiraled into something far worse. It wasn't just about the trust fund or their persistent demands anymore. It had become clear to me that I was being manipulated and, worse, harassed. I had tried to handle it privately, hoping it would all blow over, but it wasn't stopping. Each time I turned around, I found myself cornered by Max, Lily, and even my own parents, who were enabling their behavior. I knew I needed help. I couldn't continue to let my family treat me like this, especially when they were crossing boundaries. That's when I decided to take action. I spoke to a lawyer who immediately confirmed that the situation wasn't just a disagreement, it was harassment. The lawyer's advice was simple yet powerful. Document everything. At first, I wasn't sure if I should go that far. I had always tried to resolve things with my family peacefully, but the more I thought about it, the more I realized how manipulative and controlling the situation had become. So, I started documenting everything, every message, every email, every phone call from Max and Lily. I even took screenshots of conversations where they subtly guilt-tripped me or made underhanded comments about the money. It felt uncomfortable, like I was building a case against the people who were supposed to love and support me. But I knew it was necessary. I wasn't going to be silent anymore. This wasn't just about a dispute over money. It was about my autonomy and my right to live my life without constant pressure from those who were supposed to care for me. A week after that fateful meeting, I decided it was time to take the next step. With the support of my lawyer, I sent a cease and desist letter to Lily. The letter was professional, but firm, and it made one thing very clear. The harassment needed to stop, or legal action would follow. I outlined the nature of the harassment, including the repeated requests for money, the subtle manipulations, and how Lily had continuously tried to cross boundaries that were not hers to cross. I told her that if she didn't stop, I would take the necessary legal steps to protect my rights. Sending that letter wasn't easy. It felt like I was severing ties with a part of my family that I had once tried to hold on to. But it was also empowering. For the first time in a long while, I felt like I was taking control of the situation. I wasn't going to let Lily or anyone else walk all over me anymore. I had worked too hard for the life I had, and I wasn't about to let anyone take it from me, no matter how much they claimed it was for the family. The days following the letter were tense. I didn't hear from Lily immediately, but I could feel the ripple effects throughout the family. Max was still silent, and my parents, well, they were less than thrilled. But I had finally done what I needed to do for myself. It wasn't the easy way out, but it was the only way forward. The fallout was swift and brutal. As soon as Max found out that I had sent the cease and desist letter to Lily, he called me, his voice trembling with fury. "You're embarrassing yourself, Clara," he spat. His words cut deeper than I anticipated. I had always been the one to keep the peace in the family, to avoid confrontation, so hearing him accuse me of overreacting felt like a slap in the face. I calmly reminded him that this wasn't about family, it was about money, pure and simple. That shut him up for a moment, but not for long. The silence between us was thick, filled with years of built-up resentment and misunderstandings. Max was always the golden child, the one who could do no wrong in our parents' eyes. And now, he was acting like I was the one who had crossed the line. It wasn't just Max who turned against me, though. My parents, who had always been my biggest support, didn't take my side either. They called me, their voices heavy with disappointment, as if I had betrayed them somehow. "Clara, this is too much," my mom said, her voice trembling. "We just wanted peace in the family. You didn't need to escalate things by involving a lawyer." I felt like I was being punished for standing up for myself. Their reaction stung. For years, I had been there for them, for Max, for everyone. And now I was being made to feel like the villain in my own story. I tried to explain that it wasn't just about money. It wasn't about me being selfish or refusing to help my brother and his fiancée. It was about respect, respect for my boundaries and my choices. But every time I tried to explain myself, they brushed it off as if I was the one being unreasonable. My parents, who had always been the ones to defend me, were now siding with Max and Lily, telling me I was making a mountain out of a molehill. They told me I needed to see the bigger picture, that family should come first, that I should be more willing to compromise. But I was tired. I was tired of being the one who always compromised, who always put others first while my own needs and desires were ignored. This time, I couldn't just let it slide. I couldn't pretend like everything was fine. The more I thought about it, the more I realized how alone I felt. Not just in the moment, but in my entire relationship with my family. For years, I had been the one who quietly supported them, who gave without asking for anything in return. And now, when I needed them to stand by me, they were nowhere to be found. The isolation was suffocating. I had always believed that family was supposed to be a safe haven, a place where you could find unconditional love and support. But in this moment, I was seeing a different side of them, a side that made me feel like an outsider in my own life. Max, the golden boy, had never had to face the same struggles I had. Lily, with her constant demands and manipulations, wasn't even part of the family yet, but she had already succeeded in tearing us apart. And my parents, who should have been my rock, were too busy trying to keep the peace, to stand up for me. I was left questioning everything I had worked for, everything I had sacrificed for this family. Was it all worth it? Was my relationship with them worth this level of pain and disappointment? In the end, it became clear. I was the only one who could make things right for myself. But it hurt. It hurt more than I ever thought it would to realize that the people who should have loved me unconditionally were the ones making me feel like I had to prove my worth. I couldn't help but wonder if this was the end of my family as I knew it. Everything changed the day Max made his mistake. It wasn't something I ever expected to happen, but it shook everything to its core. Max, who had been so adamant about siding with Lily, accidentally sent a private text meant only for her into the family group chat. In the blink of an eye, the truth came pouring out. The messages exposed Lily's true nature, and everything she had been doing behind the scenes was finally laid bare. Max had never intended for anyone else to see what he'd uncovered, but once the message was out there was no going back. The text revealed that Lily had been manipulating not only me, but also Max, using her charm and subtle pressure to get what she wanted. It was clear from the way she spoke to him that her concerns about family and money had always been about her own ambitions, not about building something genuine with Max or becoming part of the family. The content of those messages was shocking. Lily had been so good at playing the part of the sweet, charming fiancé that I had never seen through her facade. But now, reading her words, it all clicked. She had been scheming for months, manipulating Max into pushing me to give up my inheritance, convincing him that it was the right thing to do for the family. Max had always been under her spell, but now the truth was undeniable. Max's messages to Lily were equally telling. He had written things like, "I can't believe you've been manipulating everyone, including me." And there it was, out in the open, Max finally admitting to himself, and to the rest of the family, what I had known all along. Lily had been controlling him, using his love and loyalty as leverage to get what she wanted. I could see now how deep her influence had gone, and it made me sick to my stomach. The once perfect golden boy of the family was no longer the person I thought he was. The reaction from the rest of the family was immediate. The silence that followed in the group chat was deafening. It was as if no one knew what to say. All the relatives who had been critical of me, who had sided with Max and Lily, were now faced with undeniable evidence of what had really been happening. For the first time, they saw the truth, and it hit them hard. Max had always been the golden child, the one who could do no wrong in their eyes. But now, they had to reckon with the fact that he had been manipulated, that he had been complicit in Lily's scheme. My mom and dad were the first to react. Their shock was palpable. My mom, who had been so quick to defend Lily, now found herself speechless. My dad, usually the peacemaker, looked at the phone screen like he had seen a ghost. There were no more excuses, no more justifications for what had been happening. The truth was out in the open, and they couldn't deny it anymore. As I sat there reading through the messages, a wave of relief washed over me. For months, I had been fighting to be heard, trying to stand my ground against the pressure from Max and Lily. But now, with the truth exposed, I finally felt vindicated. I didn't have to explain myself anymore. The family could see for themselves who was manipulating whom. The silence that followed in the group chat was deafening, but it was also a turning point. No one could deny what had happened, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I had won. The truth had been revealed, and with it, the lies and manipulations that had been festering for months came crashing down. What followed was a new kind of silence, the kind that came from realizing the family dynamics had been shattered. But at least, for once, I didn't have to carry the burden of pretending everything was okay. The truth was finally out, and with it came a strange sense of peace. The aftermath of everything that had happened was intense, to say the least. It felt like the dust had finally settled, but the emotional toll still lingered. The family dynamics had been shaken to their core, and things weren't going to go back to the way they were anytime soon. But in the midst of all the chaos, there was a sense of liberation, one that I hadn't felt in a long time. Max, my younger brother, the one who had always been the golden boy, was the first to reach out after everything unfolded. I was surprised when he called me, his voice laced with regret and, surprisingly, humility. "Clara, I've been thinking a lot about everything, and I can't believe I let myself get manipulated like that," he said. The words were slow, almost hesitant, but they were genuine. Max had finally seen the light, and I could hear it in his voice. For the first time, I felt like he was owning up to what had happened, and it wasn't easy for him. It wasn't easy for any of us. It wasn't just Max who started to realize the truth. My parents, too, were shaken by everything that had transpired. After months of defending Lily, they began to see what had been happening all along. They reached out to me, apologizing in their own ways. My mom, usually the one to smooth over conflicts, admitted that she hadn't truly understood what I had been going through. It was a small but important step for her, and for my dad as well. They had always been my pillars of support, but their blind allegiance to Max and Lily had made me feel isolated. Now, with the weight of the truth on their shoulders, they were finally seeing things from my perspective. It was a bittersweet moment for me. On one hand, I appreciated their apologies, but on the other, it was hard to shake the feeling of betrayal. As for Max, our relationship began to heal. Slowly but surely, we started to rebuild the trust that had been broken. I won't lie, it took time. The road to reconciliation wasn't easy, and there were moments when I wondered if things would ever go back to the way they were. But with each conversation, with each shared moment of understanding, I started to feel like we were getting closer. It would never be the same, but maybe that was okay. Sometimes you have to let go of the past to build something better. Then there was Lily. Once everything came to light, she disappeared from social media. Her wedding plans, which had once seemed so grand and all-encompassing, began to unravel. She couldn't keep up the facade anymore. The perfect life she had tried so hard to create for herself began to crumble. I watched from the sidelines as the dream wedding she had been boasting about fell apart. It was a strange feeling, almost like watching a house of cards collapse. It wasn't that I took pleasure in her downfall, but I couldn't ignore the sense of relief that washed over me. As for me, I took back control of my life. I set firm boundaries with my family, making it clear that I wasn't going to let anyone manipulate or guilt-trip me into anything anymore. For the first time in a long while, I was putting myself first. I had spent so much of my life trying to please others, trying to live up to their expectations. But now I was learning to prioritize my own happiness. I've learned some tough lessons through all of this, but the most important one is that standing up for yourself often means walking away from the people who try to control you. It means recognizing when a relationship is toxic and knowing when to step away for your own well-being. That's not easy, but it's necessary. In the end, I realized that my happiness wasn't worth sacrificing for the sake of anyone else's expectations. So here I am, reclaiming my life. I'm not perfect, and there's still a long way to go, but I'm stronger now than I've ever been. And for the first time in a long time, I feel at peace. I've learned that true freedom comes when you stop letting others dictate your life, and I'm finally living on my own terms. As I continue to rebuild my life, I can finally say that I feel free. It's not something that happened overnight, but through the lessons I've learned, I now understand that true freedom comes from within. In the past, I believed that family meant unquestionable loyalty and sacrifice, no matter what. But what I've come to realize is that family isn't defined by blood, it's defined by love, respect, and support. For so long, I was trapped by the idea that I had to please everyone around me, especially my family. I thought that if I just kept my head down, did what was expected, and played the role they wanted me to play, everything would work out. But that mindset led me to suppress my own needs and desires. It wasn't until I stood up for myself and set clear boundaries that I started to reclaim my peace. Learning how to say no has been one of the most empowering experiences of my life. For so long, I was afraid of conflict, of hurting people's feelings, of being seen as selfish. But I've learned that standing up for myself doesn't make me selfish, it makes me strong. I have the right to protect my mental and emotional well-being, and no one, no matter how close they are, should take that away from me. When I finally decided to cut ties with those who refused to show me the respect and support I deserved, it was like a weight lifted off my shoulders. It wasn't an easy decision. Family has a way of making you feel guilty for putting yourself first. But in the end, I understood that peace is found when you stop sacrificing your own happiness for the sake of others. If someone, no matter how close, continues to manipulate, guilt trip, or disrespect you, sometimes the healthiest choice is to walk away. Now, as I continue this journey of self-discovery, I'm prioritizing my own happiness above all else. I've stopped waiting for validation from people who don't understand me or my choices. Instead, I'm focusing on what truly brings me joy and fulfillment. I'm pursuing my dreams without guilt, living life on my own terms, and surrounding myself with people who genuinely love and respect me. I've also learned that family can be chosen. It doesn't have to be the people who share your last name or the ones who've known you the longest. Sometimes it's the people who stand by you when you need them the most, the ones who support you through thick and thin. And those are the people I now choose to call family. In the end, my experience has taught me that sometimes cutting ties with those who don't offer love, respect, and support is the only way to find peace. I'm grateful for the lessons, for the strength I've gained, and for the new chapter that lies ahead. This is just the beginning of a life that's mine to live, and for the first time in a long time, I'm excited about the future. One of the most important lessons I've learned through my journey is the power of setting boundaries and prioritizing your own well-being. Life can sometimes feel like a constant balancing act, especially with family. We may feel the pressure to meet others' expectations, to give in to their demands, and to keep the peace even at the cost of our own happiness. But as we grow older, it becomes clearer that true peace and fulfillment come when we allow ourselves the space to say no when necessary, and to walk away from relationships or situations that drain us. It's never easy to let go of the people we love, but we must recognize that family isn't just about blood, it's about mutual respect, love, and support. When these qualities are lacking, it's okay to distance ourselves. In doing so, we create room for healthier, more nurturing relationships. The freedom to live authentically and peacefully is one of life's greatest gifts, and it's never too late to choose it. It's a reminder that self-care is not selfish, but necessary, and that by protecting our emotional and mental health, we make space for true happiness and contentment. Life is short, and as we age, it's more important than ever to surround ourselves with people who honor and respect us for who we truly are. Thank you for watching today's video. We hope Clara's story has inspired you to reflect on your own boundaries and the importance of standing up for yourself. If you liked this video, please hit like and subscribe to Silent Wars so you never miss out on our latest stories. See you next time.